Us in the studio, we have Paul Scully, Conservative MP for Sutton and Cheam. He's former government minister in various departments. He's standing down at the next election. We have Rhun ap Iorwerth, who is leader of Plaid Cymru and a member of the Senedd for Ynys. Joanne Nadler is a political commentator. Unfortunately, our fourth guest has had to drop out for health reasons, so we will have him back very, very soon, though. So we've got a slightly smaller panel than normal, but I think that happened last week. And people liked it because everyone had a bit more time to explain themselves. So we'll see how it works today, won't we? 0345 6060 973 is the number to call.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 8 o'clock, the search for Humza Yousaf's replacement has begun after he announced his resignation as Scotland's First Minister. It comes days after he ended a power-sharing deal with the Scottish Greens. The party's leader in Westminster, Stephen Flynn, has told the newsagent's podcast former Deputy First Minister John Swinney is the only man for the job.
I think there's only one person who has the experience to do that job. I think there's only one person who can unite the party. I think there's only one person who can unite the country and have that vision that he can then go on and deliver. And I would like to think that person would be John Swinney.
A man's admitted killing an elderly mobility scooter rider 5 days after being released from prison. Lee Byers stabbed the 87-year-old in the neck and chest in Greenford in West London in August 2022. The US Secretary of State hopes Hamas will accept Israel's offer for a Gaza truce and hostage release deal. It would include a 40-day pause in fighting and the release of Palestinian prisoners. One of the two horses from the Household Cavalry injured while running loose through London last week is expected to make a full recovery. The other is said to be under careful observation. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed up 7 points at 81.47. The pound buys $1.25 and €1.17. LBC weather, a few showers for western areas tonight. These will be heavy on the southwest coast with a high of 3 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. It's 1 minute past 8 on LBC. Welcome to Monday's Cross Question. Lots to talk about, not least what's going on north of the border with the resignation of the First Minister Humza Yousaf this lunchtime. Well, joining me to discuss that and lots more, we have Paul Scully to my right, Conservative MP for Sutton and Cheam, former government minister in various different departments, former Minister for London. To my extreme left, in so many ways, we have Rhun ap Iorwerth, who is leader of Plaid Cymru and a member of the Senedd for Ynys. And to my left, Joanne Nadler, political commentator. They're here to answer your questions. 0345 6060 973. You can text 84850. You can send a WhatsApp message on 0345 6060 973. Or say, Alexa, send a comment to LBC. And if you'd like to watch us, you can do so on Global Player.
Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. Cross Question with Iain Dale. This is LBC.
Right, let's go to Chris in Cowbridge. Hello, Chris.
Hello, Ian. It's good to talk to you, and hello to your panel. My question is the following, keeping it really short. Considering what is going on in Scotland today, will this help Labour win the next general election?
Joanne Nadler.
I've got to say, I couldn't hear anything that Chris said, but if you want to talk me through it, I'll see if I can
the question
answer.
was, we'll get that fixed in the next break. Does what's going on in Scotland help Labour at the next general election?
Well, I think it does, simply because Labour will be able to step in and benefit from the very complicated and quite slow burn collapse of the SNP that's now been going on for some time.
I think for the first time they've overtaken the SNP in the polls.
Well, indeed. And that's obviously helpful to them in Scotland, but in a sense, perhaps more importantly, from Keir Starmer's point of view, it is helpful for them in terms of getting into Downing Street. And if anything, the Conservatives were helped across the UK by virtue of the fact that Labour had lost its foothold in Scotland to the SNP. So in very narrow sort of electoral terms, this would appear to be some help to Labour, certainly.
Keir Starmer is really lucky, isn't he? Given his opponents. I mean, the SNP has collapsed. You've had Tory turmoil as well in the rest of the country. You kind of need to be a bit of a lucky politician to succeed sometimes, don't you? And he certainly seems to be.
Oh, he does seem to have luck on his side for the time being. That's not only is that lucky in the sense that it's helping him to achieve what he wants, but it's also, in a sense, keeping him and his agenda from any further scrutiny, because in a sense he's riding in on the back of the collapse of, as you say, various potential opponents of his. I think it's interesting. The other thing about that is that both the SNP and the Conservative Party are in their own way very riven by huge differences across their parties over, particularly over cultural issues. And we know that that's the case with Labour as well. But because the Labour has the wind in its sails at the moment, those kind of what were big, obvious splits under the previous leadership in Labour have kind of gone into abeyance because they can smell power, they're pulling together, and people aren't interested in that story at the moment.
Rhun.
Yeah, you make the point about them being lucky that Rishi Sunak has collapsed, or the Conservative support has collapsed. It shouldn't be enough, though, should it really, for a political party leader to just say, we're not them, so vote for us. Interestingly, and it's a good question from Chris in Cowbridge, what we tell people in Wales, frankly, is that Labour are likely to become the next UK government, whatever Wales or indeed whatever Scotland say. To me, that's a good argument to vote for Plaid Cymru, because, Labour are going to be in power, but we need somebody to hold their feet to the fire as much as we need somebody to hold the Conservatives' feet to the fire. And frankly, I'm not hearing anything from Keir Starmer.
Is that what you're doing in Wales?
You can easily argue against that, though.
In Wales?
I certainly am. There's plenty to hold their feet to the fire.
But you're part of the government in Wales, aren't you?
No, we're not. No, I'm a leader. I'm a leader of an opposition party in Wales. We have an agreement whereby we are working on a set number of policies to get Labour to do things that otherwise they wouldn't unless we were using our influence. But anybody who has been watching the scandal over the past few weeks of the £200,000 donation to Vaughan Gething, the First Minister's leadership campaign, from somebody who had been found guilty of environmental crimes, and his refusal to accept that he is doing anything wrong, will see that there's no problem in us holding Labour to account.
But you could also argue that if you have a Labour government in Westminster and a Labour administration in Cardiff, that would actually be good for Wales, because Labour's more likely to help out the government in Wales than the Tory government would.
Turn it on its head. What we have currently, when the Conservatives are in power at Westminster, is a Labour government in Wales saying it's all their fault down the other end of the M4. Vaughan Gething won't be able to do that when Keir Starmer, presumably, is Prime Minister, when he holds the keys to 10 Downing Street. That gives us more chance of honesty, holding Welsh Labour government to account for their actions rather than just blaming the Conservatives. I agree that the Conservatives have made a hash of things, but we need to see Labour taking ownership of their decisions in Wales, and that'll be easier when Labour are in power in Westminster in many ways, but it won't make a blind bit of difference which way Wales votes in terms of backing Labour. Labour will get there anyway.
Why have Plaid consistently failed in Wales, whereas the SNP have effectively dominated Scottish politics for 20 years?
Oh, how long have we got?
Quite a long time, actually.
There's lots of details. I mean, it's an interesting relationship between Plaid Cymru and the SNP. Go back to the first ever devolved elections, that Plaid actually did better than the SNP back then. Plaid had the first MP here. SNP have done incredibly well in leading government in Scotland for some 17 years now. Wales isn't Scotland. Scotland isn't Wales. We have our particular nuances. One thing that Labour have been able to do in Wales, and I'd be churlish of me to blame them for it, is to keep a steady ship. Not doing much, but keeping a steady ship. I think we're seeing now with the new First Minister for Wales that ship is becoming more and more unsteady by the day, and I can't expect, as Plaid Cymru's leader, for that to fall into our laps but I'll make sure that we're fit and have a vision that the people of Wales can understand is different from Labour's.
I think the point is that in Wales, the Conservatives, certainly for a period, 2005 to 2015, that they were doing really, really well, and you couldn't capitalise on the failures of the Labour government during that, or Labour administration in Wales during that period. What's gone wrong with nationalism in Wales?
Listen, I would be lying if I sat here and said that we'd got the election results that we wanted over the years. Of course, we haven't, and you're forever trying to hone that vision that we have, which is a very different vision to the Conservatives and to Labour. It is my job to make sure that we do turn that corner, to show people that there is an alternative kind of future for Wales. I just don't believe that this is as good as it gets for Wales with our entrenched poverty, with our failure to reach the kind of economic potential that we have. Labour has been running that government in Wales and failing to do it. It's my job as the leader who's been in post now for nearly a year to try to build those alliances and forge a different kind of future for Wales.
But why would you continue with this agreement with Labour when it doesn't seem to be working to your advantage?
Well, as I say, that's been a particular 3-year programme on 46 policy areas. Through that, we have made sure that children in Wales are fed at
you mean Labour wanted to starve them?
Well, no, but they voted against Plaid Cymru motions time and time again to introduce free school meals at school. Labour were refusing even to bring in free school meals for children in families who are in receipt of universal credit. By going into this agreement, we managed to make sure that every primary school child in Wales gets a square meal so that they can concentrate. But
this is what the Liberal Democrats did. They did lots of things in the coalition and got no political kudos for it at all.
The way I see it is this. We can go into an election, not get the result that we wanted, particularly difficult election, the last one, COVID, and the power of incumbency was very, very strong, and that worked for Labour. We could go in there and just shout from the sidelines for 5 years. I'm not in the business of doing that. I'm leading a party in opposition, pretty firm opposition to Labour, but at the same time, if we can do things, if we can get things done, make changes to the housing market in much of rural Wales, so we can try to tip the balance back in favour of people who want to buy and rent homes within their communities. I'm very proud of what we've been able to do by that, and the free school meals, and a whole host of other measures. At the same time, there's no pulling of punches when it comes to holding Vaughan Gething to account, and currently we have a First Minister with very, very serious questions surrounding him and money that he accepted for his campaign.
Paul Scully, let's remind ourselves of the question. Does what's going on in Scotland help Labour at the next election?
Yeah, I mean, I think clearly it's not going to help the SNP, and therefore it helps the other parties. I mean, Labour will be seeking to take advantage of that in their areas. I think the Conservatives in their stronger areas in Scotland, when they're looking at energy policy, particularly oil and gas workers in the northeast of Scotland, they would be wanting to take advantage of that as well. Douglas Ross has been particularly, on the front foot in terms of calling for no confidence in Humza Yousaf, which has resulted in that momentum that's really that started ended in his resignation today. But we've got to do more, because I think SNP really for the last few years, it's almost been the emperor's new clothes that have been finally called out. When you look at what's happened over the last couple of years with Nicola Sturgeon's resignation and now Humza's resignation today, there was a lot of talk with not a lot of substance behind it, and I think he's really been caught out with the fact that he pulled out of the coalition and then wondered why the Greens sort of took
Which at the time, when he did it, I thought that's a bit of a masterstroke, because the Greens were threatening to do it, so he got in first. But within a few hours, it had completely unravelled.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there was
he did the right thing. I mean, regardless of whether or not it was politically helpful to him, and regardless, in essence, in a way, in the reasons that he left the coalition, or he sacked the Greens from the coalition, if you like. that was the right thing to do, because the Greens in
for how they were trying to hold him over a barrel, exactly. But
well, not only that, but the sort of policies that they were trying to sort of impose on the Scottish people, which were highly controversial
which is
ideological.
very true. Yeah, absolutely, which is very true. But I think if you're going to do something like that, you need to have a bit of a strategy, and I think that's the point. I don't think he'd done stage 2 and 3 of looking at his decision. I think you can be principled, but you also have to look at where those unintended consequences are, which have caught up.
Is that a disadvantage of having young leaders? Let's widen this out a bit, because I mean, Rishi Sunak himself is not. I think he's only in his early 40s, isn't it? Isn't he? Hamza Yousaf, is he even 40 yet? I don't think. If you have an older leader with a bit of experience, maybe they wouldn't get themselves into this kind of problem.
I actually went to. I had a dinner yesterday that I went to in Parliament with last week, in Parliament with Malcolm Rifkin speaking, and you know what? I watched him in some awe, thinking, my goodness, there's some gravitas. There's a real heavyweight there, and you do look back at when I was younger. At people that didn't get to cabinet until they were in their 60s. And these guys, they'd been 20 years in Parliament, understood the rhythms, understood the nuance, understood those unintended consequences. Whereas now is always a rush to get to the top, at whichever party, however it works. And I think there's a real risk in that, in terms of the talent that we need across all of the.
Well, of course, you wrote a biography of William Hague when he was Tory leader. How old was he then? 36 when he became
exactly,
leader.
He was the youngest ever Tory leader at that point. I mean, he was very gifted in many ways. He was probably the best debater that the Tories have had, possibly since. I mean, Margaret Thatcher wasn't a natural debater at first, so he was brilliant at PMQs. But even he would admit that he got the job too early, and he was facing an incredibly uphill battle at that moment, the sort of battle that may potentially face whoever succeeds Rishi Sunak if he isn't able to.
Which is the interesting point, isn't it? Because I think, as you say, William Hague was absolutely brilliant at PMQs. The problem is no one was listening, and in terms of the wider sense, and so.
I'm not sure about that. Well, I mean, I'm sorry. I think the Conservative Party is far too willing to take this line that we've lost, nobody's listening, and that's exactly what's happening in London at the moment.
So what I'm saying is that the risk is
an election in London at the moment. Yeah, apparently, there's somebody who's standing for mayor.
But you don't want to mention the name because we don't have to mention all the others.
And I didn't.
No, you didn't. You behaved yourself unlike most people on this programme.
So no, what I meant by that is that at that point we tend to go into a bit of a doom spiral, and there is the risk that after the next general election that we do that. And I've spoken about this quite a long time. So it's not inevitable, but it's just if we are looking inward after election debate rather than a sense of humility, then and actually looking out to what people hope want from us, then they will stop listening at that point.
Well, let's move on to some other questions in just a few moments' time. If you'd like to put a question to our panel, 0345 6060 973. You're listening to LBC. I'm Iain Dale. It's 16 minutes past 8.
This is LBC.
There it is, sat round doing nothing, that old lump sum. But what if you could get it moving with a Shawbrook savings account? Suddenly, it's looking healthier. It finally got off its AER. So stand up and take notice of our notice accounts, bond with our fixed-rate bonds, or take it easy with easy access. Save smarter, not harder, with Shawbrook. Spark your interest today at shawbrook.co.uk. Shawbrook Bank is authorised by the Prudential Regulation Authority and regulated by the FCA and PRA.
Here at the Virgin Games Development Hub, we run all sorts of tests to make sure our players get the most thrilling experiences, wherever they are. Like testing our game recommendations feature for people playing in the bath. Or our daily free games for people playing on the train. Or the perfect amount of free spins you get when you play £10. Let me see. Oh, it's 30.
Get 30 free spins when you play £10. Virgin Games. Serious about play. Visit virgingames.com. 18 plus, UK only. New members only. Must opt in. Free spins on Double Bubble. 1p coin size, max size. 30-day expiry. Full rules at virgingames.com. Play responsibly. BeGambleAware.org.
The big games deserve the biggest screens. Watch every game in all its glory with a Samsung Neo QLED TV. Enjoy pitch-perfect vision with less glare and more goals. Hear every tackle with immersive sound that follows the on-screen action. Feel like you're there with a bigger screen. 65, 75, 85, 98 inches. The Samsung Neo QLED TV. Bring it home. Discover more at Samsung.com. Features vary by model.
Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
18 minutes past 8. We have Conservative MP Paul Scully with us on the panel. We have Joanne Nadler, political commentator and author, and Rhun Iorwerth, who is leader of Plaid Cymru and a member of the Senedd for Ynys. Right, let's go to Chris in Richmond. Hello, Chris.
Hello, Ian panel. Is it time for Rishi Sunak to call a general election rather than putting us through the misery of yet another Conservative leadership contest, which he's likely to lose?
I wasn't aware there was one.
Come on.
Do you think there will be after the local elections?
Well, exactly. I mean, the letters are probably going to mount up after Thursday on it. There's lots of rumours about it.
Paul Scully.
No, I don't see it. There's lots of people talking about it because they're trying to talk it up, but I just don't see it at all. I mean, first of all, I think Rishi is he's a problem solver. What he does, he head down, trying to solve the issues around stopping the boats, around seeing the economy continuing to turn the corner with inflation coming down. Hopefully interest rates will be following soon, etc., etc. All of these kind of things. But why on earth? It'd be absolute madness for my colleagues to be shoving a load of letters in, expecting someone to come in and with a silver bullet saying, oh, right, this is going to save a whole load of seats and we're going to sweep to a magnificent victory in the general election. That's just for the birds. And I really don't see it. And people will understandably sit there and be furious if we just come up with another leader with a few months to go. From a cynical point of view, you can also say, why would someone coming in actually want to take the job at this point? Normally, from a political commentator point of view,
it's better to have been Prime Minister than not be Prime Minister.
Maybe. But if you've got a long-term view, you'd surely want someone to
let me put the opposite point of view. Let's say that Thursday's elections are a complete disaster. The Tories lose every single mayoral contest. They lose half the seats in local government. You know as well as I do, the Tory party is at its best when it panics, and it will panic. But the extent to which it panics is surely dependent on that question of could a new leader, and I don't think there are many people who do fit this category, but could a new leader lose, say, 20 or 30 fewer seats than Rishi Sunak would? And that's, in the end, how people will judge it, isn't it?
It is, but look, I think we've already baked in the fact that these are going to be incredibly challenging local elections. If you think the last time when these were fought, we were doing pretty well in the polls. We were ahead in the polls. Clearly now we are not. One thing Rishi is very good at is his maths. So, he can count.
He hasn't counted 75 billion of extra defence. We might come on to that.
We might come into it, but look, I just don't think that anybody is going to realistically sit there and think that someone is going to sweep in, even if it is 20 or 30 seats that you describe. I think we are on a set path here. Rishi's set out this programme of action and the problems that he wants to solve. And if we start just talking to ourselves for 2 months, 3 months that it takes to have a leadership competition, then when there's all these massive issues to be solved, as I say, and then making sure the planes take off to Rwanda, making sure that we continue the turning the corner for the economy, then people will understandably be shrugging their shoulders and thinking, what on earth are you doing?
Rhun.
I mean, to answer the first half of Chris's question, should there be an election as soon as possible? Yes, absolutely. We've been ready, and I think people are sick and tired of waiting. And because
Nadine Dorries predicted on Twitter on Friday that he could call an election today or tomorrow.
Yeah, but the reasoning being that if the election on Thursday was so bad that the party decided to sack him, at least he'd rather be sacked by the people of the UK and not his own party. And I guess there'd be truth in that. I mean, Paul says that it would be madness for the Conservatives to do this, to oust him after Thursday. Well, I agree, but that's not stopped the party before. So it's a game of clutching at straws. And if there's a feeling that anything is better than what they have now, there will be, I'm sure, enough of a movement within the Conservative Party to give it a go. What have they got to lose? But it's just an almighty mess, isn't it?
Joanne Nadler.
Well, I'm not, to pick up on that last point, I'm not sure that the Conservatives would plump for this option at the moment, even if there was a feeling that somebody else could do a better job at the next election. And that's because of the convoluted system for selecting a new leader, which is a lengthy process. And I think probably MPs, whilst they don't want to be turkeys voting for Christmas, they're also, I think, innately Conservative with a small c, and will probably prefer at this point to stick with Rishi. I mean, I have to admit, I've mulled this over myself a lot since the party conference, which I thought was incredibly disappointing. I felt that Rishi should have come up with an agenda that was more discernibly Conservative and also more consistent. It just seemed to be all over the place, and it was a huge wasted opportunity. So the question in my own mind has been, could somebody else do a better job at the next election? And I've had to conclude that might be the case, but it is so marginal that the damage that would be done to the Conservatives' brand, insofar as that still matters, I think the ultimate trade-off is that probably it won't happen. But the caller asked whether he should call a general election. It wasn't really about a leadership election, and whether he should put us out of our misery. And I think in normal circumstances, I mean, you always get this in the run-up to any election after a long term. You get an awful lot of speculation on behalf of commentators and the press. When's it going to happen? When's it going to happen? I can't actually remember an election in my lifetime where this hasn't happened. And I think he is the Prime Minister of the country. If he still feels that he has an agenda that he wants to pursue, and it would appear over the last 3 or 4 weeks that he's actually determined to be a bit more Conservative. He's talked about defence, he's talked about benefit reform, he's managed to make some progress, albeit we'll have to wait and see whether it amounts to anything on immigration. So I think he should be allowed to get on with that agenda. I only wish that he would be more consistent and more discernibly Conservative.
Isn't that description, though, of the Conservative Party as being pretty cautious, and at the end of the day that'll win through? Doesn't that belong to years gone by where that would have been an accurate description of the Conservative Party? But what we've seen over the past decade or so in the succession of prime ministers and leaders and a succession of panicked reactions, doesn't that show that the Conservative Party is in a very different...
But it's not what you see from Rishi. It's not what you see from Rishi, who is cautious. Actually, he's quite risk-averse when it comes to that sort of thing. And, I think he's... because, Ian, you talked about the fact that you can always get around the leadership rules. You can, but actually, are they the same people that were trying to get rid of those, around the rules, as the person that might be, putting a protagonist kind of point of view? Not necessarily the same. And a lot of the rumours that we're hearing tend to be built up, if not started, by the Labour Party, because clearly it's in their interest to have an election now. They also want to say, when's it going to happen, Rishi? When's it going to happen, Rishi? So they keep fueling that rumours just as much as the some agitators within the Conservative.
But what he could also do, which nobody seems to have speculated on so far, is on Friday or Saturday, assuming the results are pretty dramatic, is to come out, get the lectern out in the middle of Downing Street and announce an election for November the 14th. Because everybody would be completely distracted by that, and we would no doubt be discussing, well, what does that mean? Is that a good strategy? And we wouldn't be talking about the disaster of the previous 24 hours, like Ken Baker did in 1990.
I'm not sure November would be the best date, but...
well, that seems to be when everyone thinks it's going to be.
Yeah, when people don't want to go out campaigning in the evening, but I suppose there's a thought that there might be some time to introduce some more fiscal measures before then.
I'll never forget campaigning in December in 2019. It wasn't a nice experience, I tell you. November would be almost as bad. But any time,
I grew up in the age when elections were always in May or June, and it was rather nice.
Well, what you tend to find with colleagues that are leaving, like myself, that if you ask them, they'll give you a great political argument about why it'll be in the autumn. That's mainly because I haven't got a job to go to yet. It's always confirmation bias, and it'll be vice versa than the people that are trying to leave as quickly as they can. They'll come up with a great political rhetoric and narrative, and then actually it's always about themselves.
But Paul, you talked about the importance of sort of experience in Parliament, and yet, you're obviously a relatively young man, and yet you've decided to stand down. I mean, why aren't you leading by example and staying
Because
at the
I
front?
never wanted to retire as a politician. I never wanted to be in my age. I would always set up businesses, start and run my own businesses. I came in 2015. I was ready to get back to my desk in my company on the Monday had I not won on the Thursday. I've always treated my seat as a marginal seat. I'll continue to do so right the way up, and I'm now handing over to my colleague Tom Drummond, and friend Tom Drummond is going to fight that seat. But I don't want to be shuffling around in my 80s. Good luck to those that do. And so I'm not going to be part of that long-term solution. I'd already knew that in my mind 10 years ago, frankly. So better leave it to someone.
But it is interesting, isn't it, that there are so many MPs in their late 40s, early 50s who are doing this. I mean, we had Craig Whittaker on the other day, and he told us that he's already planned exactly what he's going to do. And actually, before the election, I mean, if it's November, he's going on some massive motorbike tour of the Far East.
He's a big motorbike freak, exactly.
What are you going to do?
And he's also looking for a job. That's it. I can't afford to take these long holidays, I'm afraid, so I've got to pay the bills. But Craig's also got grandchildren in Australia, and so he's got wider interests. Whereas for me, I just want to get back into get out of here. Someone said, there was a great quote that someone said, better to go 5 minutes early than 5 years too late.
Do you feel a bit demob happy, though? Would you rather the election was sooner rather than later?
Well, for the reasons that I've just given you earlier on, no.
Okay.
Well,
if anybody's got a job they would like to offer Paul, get in touch, and I'll put the two of you together.
Touting out, exactly. But no, look,
I'm trying to be a headhunter.
I think genuinely, for the political reasons, I think the fact is that Rishi, as I say, set out his path quite clearly in terms of the longer-term problems that he wants to solve, and some of them are pretty intractable. It's taken us time to get the Rwanda bill built. We've got to get the flights leaving. We've got to see further evidence, not just of we can see the green shoots in the economy, but people have got to start feeling that. And whilst they're fixing their mortgages
5 months to go.
Well, people are fixing their mortgages at the moment. And actually, so now is as they're leaping into that next thing about where's my interest rate going, I think they need to see what it actually means to them.
So you're telling us the election's going to be next January on that basis?
Oh, God help us all. No, please. Right, we'll come to more of your calls in just a moment. 0345 6060 973. You're listening to LBC. I'm Iain Dale. It's 8:30. News headlines with Daryl Jackson.
Humza Yousaf has thanked people for kind messages of love and support after announcing he's stepping down as Scotland's First Minister. The SNP leader has faced no confidence votes after ending a power-sharing arrangement with the Greens. The US Secretary of State hopes Hamas will accept what he's called Israel's extraordinarily generous offer for a Gaza truce and hostage release deal. The proposal would include a 40-day pause in fighting and the release of Palestinian prisoners. And Sophie, the Duchess of Edinburgh, has visited Ukraine. This morning, Her Royal Highness met the President and First Lady and delivered a message to them on behalf of the King. LBC weather, a few showers for western areas tonight. These will be heavy on the southwest coast and a low of 3 degrees.
This is LBC.
Politicians talk it. We happily deal with it. Happy Drains, experts at unblocking all types of residential and commercial drainage issues. We'll flush out whatever's causing you the problem, with 5-star service available 24 hours a day. If only the same could be said during PMQs. Happy Drains. All your drainage issues sorted. Guaranteed. Visit happydrains.co.uk.
Here in the Southeast, we sell amazing products and services the whole world wants.
We're global processing services from London, and we help people pay in innovative ways in over 48 countries.
Whilst at Naturally Tribal in Milton Keynes, our all-natural skincare range soothes skin conditions in 5 countries.
So whether you're new to exporting or experienced, explore global growth for your business with free support from the UK government. Access information, training, events and expert advice to help you find new customers overseas. Visit great.gov.uk to get started.
Ugh, I never liked her anyway.
He's clearly a narcissist.
Well, she stopped. She's seeing the kids.
He negotiates for a living. Lawyer up and protect yourself.
We get it. You mean well. But when someone you love gets divorced, saying these things does more harm than good. That's where we come in. Amicable is a legal service that makes divorce kinder and simpler. No demonising, no aggression, just better outcomes for everyone. Amicable.co.uk. Divorce made kinder.
Jump
Jump into a Škoda Plus approved used car with 11.4% APR representative plus £750 deposit contribution on Solutions PCP. 2 years servicing, 2 years warranty, 2 MOTs and 2 years roadside assistance. To use when driving to places like your 2-year-old's tutu party in Tooting tomorrow. Škoda approved used event available from the 15th to the 29th of April. So visit your local retailer today. Škoda. Indemnities may be required at participating retailers. Vehicles up to 8 years and 100,000 miles at activation. Škoda Finance. Toodaloo.
MJ, the multi-award-winning new musical thrilling West End audiences. It's a ravishing spectacle, says the Evening Standard. Gravity-defying dancing and all the mega hits, says The Guardian. And the Daily Mail raves, you can't beat it. MJ at London's Prince Edward Theatre. Book now at mjthemusical.com.
Leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
8:33 on LBC. Someone says, why are we having a Conservative Party political broadcast? Well, we're not, and I don't think Paul and Joanne would agree with that description. But we have got a slightly unbalanced panel tonight because our fourth panellist couldn't make it due to a health issue, and he was somebody on the left. So apologies if you think it's a little unbalanced. Shall I try and be the other lefty on the panel for the next half an hour? I think some people think I am anyway. Let's go to Michael. He's got a text question. Isn't it only fair to say to the EU that we'll take migrants back from Ireland if France takes back those who've come over to our shores on small boats? Now, the UK will not take back asylum seekers who cross the border into Ireland until the EU accepts that we can send them back to France, according to a government source, as the row between Dublin and Westminster heats up. This has all the hallmarks of a right old stooshy, doesn't it, Joanne?
Well, we were talking earlier, weren't we, about lucky politicians, and Rishi Sunak hasn't had a great deal of luck, but he must be wondering how on earth this has cropped up in the way that it has, because actually it would appear, and many of us have been quite sceptical about not the principles behind what he's trying to do with Rwanda, but whether or not there was actually any practical application to it. And yet this seems to have landed really unexpectedly, almost confirming that, perhaps everything that he's been telling us about Rwanda actually is tenable and actually could work in terms of creating a deterrent. So the question is absolutely correctly phrased, really. It points up exactly this irony that Ireland, the sort of great manifestation of everything about the single market and the EU and the great advocates for open borders, is now up in arms about the fact that they're on the receiving end of the logic of that.
Rhun.
Well, I was particularly interested in the interview that David Cameron did a few days ago, pointing out that post-Brexit, it has become more difficult to build the kind of links that you need with France in order to have that international relationship on how to deal with the movement of people, which is the way
one side wants to make it difficult.
Would be. Well, no, Brexit has made it more difficult. The UK voted to make it more difficult, and one of the things that the UK voted to make more difficult was having those relationships with France and the wider European Union on how to deal with movement of people.
That. I mean, David Cameron as Prime Minister was not able to achieve that whilst we were still in the EU.
And there isn't a silver bullet to these things, sadly. It is a feature of the global movement of people that there has to be international collaboration in the most intense way in order to find joint solutions. And what I see the Rwanda solution as being is just this signal of the UK wanting to sort of go it alone, do something that nobody else has done, that I firmly believe is not workable. There are so many challenges to it still.
Let's keep to the subject.
But the question of the relationship with France is key to this, I think. I note what's been happening on the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, but you can't look at any border in isolation, including that one.
Well, you kind of can. No, that was the whole argument during Brexit about that particular border. It's different to any other.
But what we're seeing again and again is that Brexit was not the answer to whatever the problem was with borders that people thought they were being asked to approve. We have issues with border controls, a decision, things were meant to be kicking in tomorrow on new border controls. They're having to be put back again. The issue of the movement of people across the Channel still clearly hasn't been resolved. Things have got worse. More people are dying crossing the Channel now than they used to, because there are no legal means for people to come in to seek asylum, which is an important part of having a robust asylum policy, which of course you have to have. But currently it's failing.
OK, Paul.
Yeah, well, ironically, the agreement that ended when we left the EU is the Dublin Agreement. All the towns and the cities to name it after. But I think it is important that, as Iain said, actually, when you said about it's only difficult when the two parties can't see that, make that agreement. Clearly, when we left the EU, it was down to our sovereignty. So we can choose to pool that sovereignty through an international agreement. Yeah. It just means that we've got to work through it again. It just we come out of autopilot, we go into something that we can discuss
but remember,
ourselves.
It's the Foreign Secretary who said that post-Brexit
because we haven't made that agreement. And if you look at the Dublin Agreement itself, it is actually starting to fracture within the EU countries as well, because of this isn't just a solely UK problem. This is something that we're seeing pressures on other countries in the EU, and even before we left the EU, when we had 1 million people travelling through Slovenia, Slovakia up towards Germany, those smaller countries in particular were really starting to push back on that overall EU agreement. So there is a wider viewpoint here. But yes, you're right. I think the tenet of the question, we should get a better agreement with France if we are even going to countenance looking at anything from coming back from Dublin.
Right, shall we move on to another subject? Bradley is in Anglesey. Hello, Bradley.
Hi, Ian.
Hi, what would you like to ask?
I had a question for Rhun, just on the topic of free school meals. I was wondering, why does he think that all children should receive a free school meal? Surely the taxpayer shouldn't be paying for, wealthy parents' children's meals.
Thanks for the question, Bradley. You're making me feel homesick. A constituent of mine up in Anglesey. There. Listen, this isn't something that is uniquely Welsh. You can look around the world, and even parts of the United States. Looking at Scandinavia, have made the call that providing children with a meal at school, getting rid of the stigma that divides people who come from poorer backgrounds and have free school meals anyway, is a positive thing, not just in terms of education, but socially too. We have been through a number of guises, haven't we, in terms of making sure that children are properly fed, because that has a positive education impact. One of those was on breakfast at schools, and I firmly believe that free school meals can become a part of a culture in Welsh education that can lead to hopefully rising standards, because that's what we want to see.
Is it really a good thing for the state to take over the role of parents?
I think parents hand over their children to the care of a school for the duration of the school day. I think it's perfectly reasonable for us to believe that making sure that they are fed whilst they are there should be a core part of that, when it has positive education benefits plus positive social benefits.
I think people agree that there is plenty of evidence there to show that it is positive educationally that children are fed well. However, I think the point of the question is someone's got to pay for this, and the taxpayer's got to pay for it at the end of the day. And I'm not sure you these days get the stigma that was attached to free school meals when you used to take in your envelope and money, or you used to claim your free school meals, because so much of it now is done automatically, through a card or whatever like that. And the difficulty that you have, because when you have the system that you're then just subsidising richer, wealthier people's school meals, you're taking that away from another part of education, textbooks or teachers' pay or some other type of infrastructure. So better, surely, to actually have a system that is destigmatised, that is anonymous, if you like, but it allows the teachers to understand who is on free school meals, as it were, through a relatively anonymous system, so that they can then claim pupil premium and these kind of things. Because otherwise, we don't understand the makeup of those school children, and they can't direct into more deprived areas.
Yeah, I mean, you're right that electronic payments have made a difference on the stigma issue, but I still believe that creating that unity, that leveller, that everybody going into the school is treated the same, has that meal at lunchtime, can have a positive social benefit too.
The children aren't aware. How is it not a leveller?
To me, it's about that creating the culture of the kind of education system that we want, and it fits in at the heart of it. A, good for education, B, good for nutrition, and C, gelling everybody together, signing up in the same way to sit down and have that meal together at lunchtime.
I'm very interested in what you're saying about parents and the role that they play in their children's education, because as far as I understand it, Plaid Cymru are signed up to Welsh Labour's policies on relationships and sex education for primary school children. And Wales has got, if you like, the most ideological approach to this across all of the British jurisdictions. And it's the only place where parents, if they have any reservations about some of the curriculum, are not able to withdraw their children at primary age level from these lessons. Yeah. So how is that working with parents?
And you're talking about the new curriculum that has been introduced in Wales, and it's not a matter of Plaid Cymru signing up to Labour's policy. This is something that we believe in as a party.
You're admitting that.
And very happy to take ownership of the fact that we want to create a situation where our children and young people are brought up in a way that understand what a healthy relationship is,
but
so that they're able to think for themselves.
Why do you feel their parents can't teach them that? What is the problem with parents handling what really, I mean, for most of civilization, parents have done?
Yeah,
what is it that's so peculiar about the Welsh situation that this needs to be done, mandated by the government?
I can tell you, hand on heart, that of all the parents that I've spoken with, the vast majority approve of what we're trying to do in creating the basis for healthy relationship and respect between boys and girls and girls and boys.
And only exclusively in Wales are they not allowed to withdraw their children from these classes?
I can't think of a single child who I wouldn't want to be able to be given guidance on empowering themselves to understand what is a healthy relationship and what is not.
From the age of 5 to learn about complicated matters to do with sex and sexuality.
That's not how it works at all. I hear people say that that's what it is. That is not what it is at all. It's about being age relevant. It's about being age sensitive, and the changes in the discussion changes as that child becomes older, and the different relationships that they're going to end themselves in.
Take that decision for themselves?
As I say, I don't think there's any child that should not be taught
but you're not the parent to all of those children.
But I think it's interesting because you're focusing rightly on parents, because actually, I've seen some of the comments that come in, and when they're talking about, are we begrudging people there's school meals? No, we're not. Of course we're not. What we're saying is there should be a greater degree of parental responsibility for those people that can afford. My children are grown up now, but when they were young, I could pay for my children's meals. And why on earth would I be paying taxes, then getting a handout back, whereas I could directly have that relationship with the school, as long as I said earlier, children who would otherwise be stigmatised could have an anonymous way of doing it. So we've really got to make sure that we keep the connection in London, and I try not to mention the candidates for electoral reasons.
Well done, Paul.
But there is
you'll be invited back.
But there is an argument about what's happening with school meals, because at the moment they're free in London, and should they continue to be free?
And England is broadening, following Wales' lead.
If the government are paying for that, that's one thing. But if London's paying for it when it's not under the auspices of the mayor's direct responsibility, responsibility. It's costing £130 million. Where's he getting that from? Actually, the mayor's precept has gone up £470 over the last 7 years. Obviously, the ULEZ expansion is affecting predominantly people on lower pay. So they're taking one hand and actually to put money into...
Well, to be fair, we haven't got a Labour representative here, and my brain is so addled at the moment that I can't even think what the arguments are against what you just said, so forgive me for that. Right, we're going to move on in a moment. We have a fantastic fun question for the end of the programme as well, so stay tuned. 8:47.
This is LBC.
Listeners, we interrupt the airwaves to share an incredible discovery. The reason why Britain hasn't been so great of late is because the country hasn't been eating enough Weetabix. We must get to work in rebuilding Great Britain bix by bix by delivering Weetabix to whoever's in charge of fixing potholes, to VAR and people who somehow manage to park over 2 bays. To Britain, we must say. Have you had your Weetabix?
School reunion. What am I doing? Getting these people together after all these years. The last time we shared a room, there was leg warmers and rah-rah skirts involved.
We can't help the uncertainty around getting old friends together. But when it comes to bringing your old pensions together, we can help. Transfer all your old pensions into one place. To combine, go to standardlife.co.uk. Transferring pensions won't be right for everyone. Money invested is at risk. Provided by Phoenix Life Limited, trading as Standard Life. For full details, visit standardlife.co.uk.
Here in the South East, we sell amazing products and services the whole world wants.
We're global processing services from London, and we help people pay in innovative ways in over 48 countries.
Whilst at Naturally Tribal in Milton Keynes, our all-natural skincare range soothes skin conditions in 5 countries.
So whether you're new to exporting or experienced, explore global growth for your business with free support from the UK government. Access information, training, events and expert advice to help you find new customers overseas. Visit great.gov.uk to get started.
If you live with pain and discomfort caused by loose and missing teeth or dentures, our TDC Smile in a Day same-day dental implants restore a full set of natural-looking teeth, so you get your smile and your confidence back.
I can eat what I like. I can smile all the time. I don't talk with my hand over my mouth. It's just made me so happy. It's like winning the lottery, I should imagine.
To book your consultation, visit smileinaday.co.uk.
TDC.
We're now part of Bupa.
Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC.
8:49, Conservative MP Paul Scully, Rhun ap Iorwerth from Plaid Cymru, he's the leader of Plaid Cymru, and Iain Nadler, political commentator and author. They're here taking your calls and questions. Vaz in Warwick says, will the proposals to end benefits for people with mild health conditions place further strain on mental health services? Paul Scully.
No, I think if we get it right, it can actually do the opposite, and it's important that we do get it right, because what we saw in 2010, when we first came in with the coalition government, we saw a massive increase in the amount of disabled people, for example, entering the workplace for the first time. A 250,000, I think, if I remember rightly, at that time. And so it can add a sense of self-worth. It can help in terms of engagement, social engagement, and getting out of someone's home. But you've obviously got to do it in a sensitive way. So it's changing the...
Is that possible?
Yes, again, that we've had some stop-starts in the 10 years ago when Universal Credit came in with some of the contractors that were working on this. But if you're having a fit for work assessment, the default is, how can you interact with the workplace? Can you do a few hours? Can you do more than that? Then, as I say, it can give you that bonus, as long as we're not just demonising people, which will then clearly add stress to those people's lives.
Rhun.
I'm really fearful about the impact that this will have. We deal with people week in, week out who are in a position where they have to make applications for PIP. So many of them get turned down when they clearly should be receiving payments, and so many of them, a majority, win their appeals because government should be supporting them.
Clearly should be getting them, but obviously the people who are processing the applications don't think that.
Well, if you look at the percentage, it's something like 60% of appeals are successful. which tells you that there's something wrong in how the applications are assessed in the first place. These are people who do need that support from government, and I worry about the impact now of, especially on people who suffer mental ill health. Government should be looking at what's causing the increase in mental ill health and the lack of spending on public services and the way that impacts lives. This is a short-term measure that will have a long-term impact, I have no doubt, on people with disabilities. And I think it's Scope that called this a reckless assault on people with disabilities, and I agree with them.
But as I said, they did that. There was similar noises off in 2010 when Universal Credit came in, and some of these assessments came in at that time.
And I've seen the impact of it, and the number of weeks people had to wait before their payments kick in, and the pain and suffering that they have waiting
staging at the beginning, which could have been different. But the overall, the Universal Credit, I think, has been judged to be pretty well as a success. Clearly, what we've had to do is reflect on what's happened during COVID, and why suddenly there was a massive leap in the amount of people that are economically inactive, which not only did put pressure on those people themselves, but also put pressure on our wider economy as well.
I think Paul's right. I think this is a sort of necessary and sort of sober look at a problem that has increased, but it's also crept up in a sense without having been scrutinised properly. And we've seen, particularly amongst younger people, an incredible rise in, the discussion that we have now is around the phrase mental health as distinct, in a sense, from what we used to refer to as mental illness. And I think that, in a way, that's created a sort of a whole new area that we're struggling to come to terms with, how it affects individuals, this idea of mental health, and what is, if you like, I think Mel Stride said last week, quite sensibly, and I think with compassion, that there are, it's not easy being a human being. We will all encounter at various points in our lives a degree of stress, strain, potentially depression, anxiety. And yet we're hearing a sort of a huge uptick in reference to all of these things. And I think it is time that we took a sensible look now at the degree to which those conditions should be medicalised, should be treated, should be responded to in a care setting, and the extent to which people might be better off being helped back into work. And I don't think that should be particularly controversial.
I think you're right to say that we need to draw a distinction between issues of well-being and mental illness, schizophrenia, bipolar, and so on. That's something that I spoke about when I was my party's health spokesman. But there are still issues of, mental health and well-being that make people incapable of work.
But is it
and it's making it more difficult to assess them as being unable to work. That worries me.
There is a crossover, isn't there? Not all emotional well-being issues are mental health issues that need to be treated in a medical way. But there is clearly a crossover it's getting that bit right, that crossover right. One of the things that we're doing is putting £6 billion into some of the well-being support as well, to make sure, so it's not just all let's reassess the assessments and change all of that. It's backed up by cash to then go into that support to make sure that there is a staging and there is a transition process.
I'm debating whether to do one last question or continue this discussion, because it's a difficult one and you'd only each have about a minute to answer it. But hey, why not? Alex asks, is it time for the government to offer a proper, binding, free vote on assisted dying?
Yes.
Paul?
Yeah, I would. It's the one time I've been in on a Friday for private members' bills, actually, was to support the assisted dying bill. I don't come out to that easily, but and I know that Parliament tends to look at it from a religious point of view, a medical point of view in terms of palliative care. But I think at the end of the day, you should be able to plan how you end your time on this earth.
Rhun?
I think there should be a vote, yes, because it's not just about having that day when you vote. It's about having that whole period of scrutinising and debating and discussing. It's, for us as a party, a matter of conscience, and there will be different elected members and members of the party who will have different views. But let's have that discussion. Personally, I'm in the same place, and I think people should, know that they have good palliative care that they're able to turn to, but also should be empowered themselves as individuals.
I don't think it's time for the government to do that, although, of course, we live in an open society and we can discuss these issues. But I do think life is sacred, and I'm just not convinced that any of the safeguards that are put around these proposals won't, in time, be worn away. So I would not be in favour of a vote because, bluntly, I'm not in favour of the proposal.
But if you look at other countries that have done this, there seem to be some reasonable examples where some of the worst fears have not been realised.
Well, I mean, I think that's an incredibly hard thing to gauge, because you would have to then go into the circumstances of those particular families. And obviously, once somebody has ended their life, they're not in a position to comment on whether or not it was the right thing to do. Now, I know these things are immensely complicated, and one has to be compassionate, and people will feel that that they have a right to have a say over how these things happen. My feeling is that there are certain elements of our existence which governments just actually, and the state just can't actually make any easier. And in fact, often they make them worse.
I think some of the people that I've seen campaign for assisted dying, they've actually realised that it is incredibly complicated, as you say, and so some of the arguments that their supporters might want does really butt up against those complicated issues. So they've actually rallied back. They're only probably doing 80% of what they would actually like, so they don't get into those grey areas. Still makes it tricky.
Right, let's move on to our fun question from somebody who's anonymous. I'm going to be very careful who I ask this one to first. Second-hand clothes app Vinted has made a profit for the first time. What's the one item of clothing from your past that you wish you'd kept? Rhun.
It was itself a second-hand item of clothing. It was a wonderful biker jacket, sort of John Travolta Grease style that I bought. Really wasn't my style. End of the 80s, and I sold it when I needed some cash, I think, as a student. I would love it if I still had it now. Problem is, though, I couldn't possibly wear it, but it'd be a lovely piece of art hanging up somewhere in the house. You think so? Yeah.
The problem with me is that I have pretty much kept them all. So I've got, shall we say, a hugely curated selection of my own vintage. But there is one thing that I sort of regret somehow having let go of, and that was a very cool tan leather coat.
Well, no, that sounds
so leather jackets have it.
No, it was a long coat. It was tan, and I used to wear it when I worked at the BBC, and it was very cool.
Paul?
I'm sure I'd have a comfortable jumper that I could talk about, but actually it's the comedy value. I used to have a long black sort of trench coat type thing when I used to have... I had a long
leather again?
I had long hair. It's all about coats, isn't it? Yeah. And, which I bought again, second-hand from Camden Market. And I remember, the reason it's comedy value, I remember my dad, his face when I walked in this long coat. And then I also remember his face when he had it with tongs and holding it with two fingers as he burnt it in the garden incinerator.
Well, thank you very much for all of your contributions tonight. I'm going to end the show slightly early tonight because I'm not feeling particularly well. Don't worry, it's nothing serious, but Ben Kentish is ready to stand by. Thanks for all of your calls and messages today. I'll be back tomorrow from 7 p.m. Guests on tomorrow's panel will include Lib Dem Christine Jardine and Ben Riley-Smith from The Telegraph. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, the official LBC app. Don't you start there, Joanne. Where you can also pause and rewind live radio. Download now for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Coming up at 1 on LBC, it's Richard Spur. But right now, it's Ben Kentish.
Iain, thank you very much indeed, and feel better soon. Coming up, we're going to be talking about yet another day of drama in Scottish politics, the resignation of Hamza Youssef after he blew up his own government by scrapping an agreement with the Scottish Greens. What on earth was he thinking? Did he not foresee that was likely to happen? It continues, doesn't it? An absolutely awful year and a half for the Scottish National Party. And I wonder this, if the main proponents of Scottish independence are